Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat?
Everyone seems to always joke that there's never a shortage of storylines with the New Orleans Saints, and it couldn't be more true than right now, because I look at this and I'm like, there's about 3 different ways I can start this interview, whether it's Derek Carr, whether it's the offensive line, whether it's Alvin Kamara coming back, which actually seems to fly under the radar. But we're going to go with Derek Carr. Did not practice.
And you didn't even get to Marshon, Lattimore, Mike Evans.
That's true.
Usually the free space on the Saints Bucs bingo card.
That's just you sit down at the table, you cover that one up, and you wait for them to draw the rest of the numbers. Man, that's true. Marshon, Lattimore, and Mike Evans. 4 different places we could begin, Mike. Let's start with Derek Carr. A DNP on the injury report, I should say, again today. But was there anything different? Was it the exact same as yesterday? Was he able to do anything today?
Yeah, I mean, he was tossing the ball gently, like he was catching the ball when they threw it back, and then he would toss it to someone else. I mean, he's not immobilizing the shoulder. He's walking around. He's talking with his hands out there on the field. I mean, it's not one of those things where we're going to, put a boot on it until Saturday and then test it for the first time. So I guess that's a good sign. But I mean, I really genuinely believe, not just because I believe everything they say, but also based on the history of other people who have dealt with these injuries, that everything they're saying is kind of the deal. It's not a major risk of re-injury, but he has to be able to function with it. And I talked to Drew Brees earlier this week, and he did play just 1 week after having a grade 1 level injury of this type. But he said that week he did not throw a single pass all week in practice. He said it was actually the only week in his entire career where he didn't throw once in practice before he played on game day. So there's really nothing you can do to test it unless you're shooting the guy up and taping the guy up and trying to mimic a game situation. Otherwise, I think you're just trying to let it rest all week and then deciding, do you feel like you can go through it? I don't know how you make that decision. I'm still erring toward that. I don't think he'll play, but I'm certainly not ruling it out.
Okay, so that was kind of going to be my next question, right? Because it's something I touched on a little bit earlier. I think everyone kind of just automatically assumes, it's Jameis. Jameis is taking all the reps. They brought in Lattimore on the practice squad as an extra quarterback, all those kinds of things. But, I mean, they let Jameis go out there and play with a broken back last year. If Derek Carr says he can go, I mean, is that an area? Is that something they literally consider? Like, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and you look at Derek Carr's history, and he listed him off. I mean, he did not miss a game with a broken pinky in his throwing hand a couple years ago. He missed only 1 game with a transverse fracture in his back. He did not miss a game when he tore his groin. He is one of those guys who wants to go at all costs if he can. And it's interesting that you mentioned Jameis, because Jameis is one of those guys too. And I talked to him later in the year when obviously things weren't going the way he hoped and he didn't get his starting back job from Andy Dalton. And he admitted, I probably should not have played at Tampa. I wanted to play with my broken back, and then he tears a ligament in his foot, and then he plays another week too. These guys want to play, so sometimes somebody has to make a decision that overrules a quarterback's desire to play. So it's never an easy decision. But then again, with Brees, when he played that week I was just talking about, he went out and he threw 5 touchdown passes in Pittsburgh. So every case is different. It really is.
One thing that complicates this one a little bit more might be putting him back behind the offensive line. So I want to talk about the offensive line. Mike, are you surprised they're struggling this much?
Very surprised. Look, maybe we overrated these guys. If you go through them individually, James Hurst is another year older after he kind of overachieved the last couple of years, and he moved from left tackle to left guard. Trevor Penning is still very raw. Cesar Ruiz, finally had his best year last year, but then he had the broken foot and missed a lot of the offseason. I mean, I guess it's not a huge surprise that those guys are struggling. I'm a little more surprised to see Ryan Ramczyk and Eric McCoy battle inconsistencies. But, I mean, these guys, I thought our big concern with these guys was health, and they were healthy the entire offseason. They worked with each other every day in practice for 5 straight weeks. I really expected that group to be a strength, and it has not been. It's been by far the biggest problem on this team.
So if it's not health, and I mean, outside of Cesar Ruiz's concussion, it hasn't been. I mean, is there something that you think you can pinpoint as to why a veteran group has struggled outside of pinning a veteran group?
Yeah, and they're all losing. They're all taking turns losing. And you know, from what we've seen watching tape and from talking with players, James Hurst said today, he genuinely was like, I really can't think of one big mistake that's been a communication error. It has just been guys getting beat one-on-one by the defensive player. And it was Trevor Penning, obviously a lot in that first game, but it's been Hurst, it's been Eric McCoy, it's been Cesar Ruiz a couple times, and it was Ryan Ramczyk a few times in this last game. They've all taken turns getting beat, and they're getting beat even when they're bringing in 6th and 7th guys to help. It's really pretty startling.
Yeah, when they brought in Landon Young as a 7th offensive lineman and gave up the sack. I mean, that was kind of the low point. I feel like at that moment, it's like, oh Lord. Okay, so that kind of brings me to Kamara now, because I think normally I feel like this return would have been met with great fanfare, but it doesn't really feel like that. And this is a spot where, I mean, he's not coming off injury, he's coming off suspension, so he should be in shape, he should be explosive, he should be ready to go. What type of impact can he have, though, in his return with the struggles up front?
Yeah, I think he's important for this offense if it becomes the offense it wants to be. They are very excited about using him in space more. They're very excited about using him in the passing game more. A couple of those plays where Chris Olave caught passes out of the backfield, those were Alvin Kamara plays in week 1. But I don't think he will be a big part of this offense if it starts to look like what it's supposed to look like. He can't fix this problem. Like, if he was the guy running, I wrote this earlier this week. I went and looked it up. They had 13 the offensive line is struggling in the run game too. They had 13 first down runs in this last game, and on 9 of them they gained 1 yard or less. I mean, Alvin Kamara can't turn nothing into something. I mean, he's great in open field. He can make guys miss, but he can't just run into a line that creates no holes either. And then I'm a little concerned with, I'm sure it's going to be a big priority for Jameis Winston to get the ball to Alvin Kamara in the passing game, but that was our number one concern last year when Jameis was the starter, was that hasn't been a strength of his, is throwing to running backs in rhythm. So, it's going to be tough if Jameis Winston is the quarterback for that to be a big part of this offense. So he can only help because they need 5-yard gains. They need 7-yard gains. They need it to be 2nd and 5 and 3rd and 2 every once in a while instead of 3rd and 10 all the time. So certainly he can help with quick passes and just getting some guys in space a little bit, but he's not a magic elixir for the particular struggles they've been having.
Talk with Mike Triplett, neworleans.football. He's on Twitter at Mike Triplett. Mike, with Jameis Winston there in that vein, yesterday when Dennis Allen met with the media, he was asked if they considered Taysom Hill as an option, and he said flatly no. Is that surprising at all, given the struggles up front?
Yeah, I would think that would be – I think it would have to be and should be a consideration if Carr was definitely going to miss 3 or 4 weeks or longer. But I think it makes even more sense to just go with Jameis under the current circumstances, because even this week, I mean, like we just said, they're leaving open the possibility that on Saturday morning or Sunday morning, they decide Derek Carr is ready to go. Certainly by next week, that'll be the case, that it could be Carr. And, if you fully install a Taysom Hill game plan, I think that's so different than what it would be for either Jameis Winston or Derek Carr, that if it's just 1 week and if it might even be 0 weeks, then I think it makes a lot more sense to install the exact same game plan and just have Jameis run.
A couple more offensively here. When you look at them in total on offense, red zone struggles, run game struggles, pass game struggles, the offensive line, low point total. Now, injuries. It kind of feels crazy to ask, but Mike, do you feel like they're getting close?
I think the receivers, I love the playmakers. Unfortunately, it's felt like desperation every time they throw to Chris Olave and Mike Thomas and Rashid Shaheed instead of rhythm. But those guys are delivering every time. So if you have 3 receivers like that, you've got a chance to be special. Alvin Kamara is does give you a chance to be special. Kendry Miller is now healthy, and I think he can be special. So I like Jawan Johnson. I haven't untapped him yet. Jimmy Graham, we saw him catch his first touchdown. There's just so many options in this offense. And I like Derek Carr to be the one who can get the ball to those options. I think they just got to fix one thing. They got to fix the offensive line. And look, that can be through play calling too. I'm stunned that we haven't already seen them revert to just being one of these quick passing teams that's three-step drop and throw on every down. I think we're really close to seeing that for this team. But I mean, obviously it's been a huge problem, and it's much easier said than done to just say fix the offensive line. But I think if they get that one thing fixed, there's still a ton of potential in this offense.
So that was actually going to be where I was going next was play calling, because I was going to ask how much of the blame for this should fall on Pete Carmichael.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a two-part question. He definitely has not fixed the problem. He hasn't gotten them out of the problem. He hasn't adjusted well enough to the problem. I mean, he needs to give his offensive line more help, and he needs to call plays that don't require the offensive line to hold him back, and he needs to do a better job of keeping his team out of 3rd and 10 situations. But at the same time, I'm sure he has great game plans and great creative plays and great things he wants to do that they just haven't been able to get to because, when it's 2nd and 10 and when it's 3rd and 9, your play sheet stinks. And Derek Carr's standing back there, and when it's 3rd and 9, you need 5 seconds for passing routes to develop, and he's getting 2 seconds. And it's just like, for the same reason that we haven't been able to fairly judge Derek Carr, I don't think we've been able to fairly judge what this offense wants to be. But he definitely deserves some blame for not, adjusting well enough to the problems they're having.
Mike Triplett, neworleans.football on Twitter at Mike Triplett. Mike, I guess I should ask at least one about the actual game with Tampa Bay. Matchup to watch in that one?
Well, I mean, it is Marshon versus Mike Evans, and it's not just Marshon versus Mike Evans because that's always the matchup to watch. Will the Tampa Bay figure out some way to get Marshon ejected again? Because then they can finally score a touchdown whenever he leaves the field. If that wasn't orchestrated, it should have been last time because it was brilliant. But it's also a big matchup because that is the one thing that's working for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right now. They're not a great football team top to bottom, but Mike Evans is playing as well as he ever has, and Baker Mayfield has figured out, I'm just going to keep getting the ball to Mike Evans and let him try to win games. So not only is that a fun matchup because of the history, but it should be the matchup for any defense facing them right now is try to slow down what Mike Evans is doing, and obviously nobody does that better in the NFL than Marshon.
That's very true. Y'all get over to neworleans.football, get subscribed up. If you haven't already, you can read Mike's stuff there. And, of course, Nick and Brooke, they do great stuff as well. Mike with us here every Thursday on AFR. Appreciate the time as always, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.